City were leading at half-time, in control, doing exactly what they needed to do, and then the second half happened. Everton scored 3, the game flipped completely, and Doku rescued a point in the 97th minute to make it 3-3. That part you probably already know. What you might not know is what happened after the final whistle, what Guardiola said in front of the cameras, what Doku admitted publicly about the collapse, and what all of it actually means for City's title chances from this point forward. Stay until the end, Man City Sentinel, no filler. Hit that like button, subscribe, and let's get into it. City went into this game with momentum and a clear objective. Win, keep the pressure on Arsenal, and show the Premier League they are still a genuine title threat. For 43 minutes, everything looked exactly as planned. The Blues were in control, pushing forward, and Doku had already made his mark with a goal in the first half. City led going into the break, and the script seemed to be writing itself. Then the second half happened. Everton came out of the tunnel like a completely different side. Tierno Barry took over. The striker scored twice in rapid succession, turning the game on its head and silencing the travelling City support. Then Jake O'Brien added a third, and just like that, the scoreline read 3-1 to Everton. A lead had become a crisis. A controlled performance had turned into a full collapse, and with each passing minute, the implications for the title race were getting heavier. Erling Haaland pulled one back to make it 3-2 and gave City a lifeline. It was the kind of moment you expect from him. Composed, clinical, refusing to let the game die. But the clock was running, and City were still trailing. One goal was not going to be enough. And then came the 97th minute. Doku picked up the ball, drove at the Everton defence with the kind of directness that makes him so difficult to stop, and finished. 3-3. Goodison erupted in disbelief. The City bench exploded. A point had been salvaged from the ruins of what looked like a damaging defeat. His first goal came at 43 minutes, his second at 90+7. In between those two moments, City had completely lost control of a game they were supposed to be winning comfortably. But Doku did not let it end in disaster. The numbers behind his performance tell the full story of just how influential he was. A 9.8 rating on SofaScore, 85 touches, 5 completed dribbles, 4 chances created, 14 duels won, 423 metres covered in progressive carries, the highest of any player on the pitch. In the chaos of the second half, when City's structure had completely broken down and the team was chasing the game, Doku was the one constant. He was the engine, the threat, and ultimately, the man who kept City's title hopes mathematically alive with one late individual moment of brilliance. His second goal came after an error from Mark Guehi in the Everton defence. But make no mistake, Doku had to read the situation, react faster than anyone else on that pitch, and finish under pressure. That is not luck. That is a player operating at the very top of his game, when the stakes could not be higher. The honest take here is this: what Doku produced on that night was extraordinary, and it deserves to be recognised as such. But one player cannot carry an entire team through a title run. The collapse that led to Everton's 3 goals was a collective failure, in shape, in intensity, in concentration. City gifted Everton that game in the second half, and had Doku not been on the pitch, this would have been a devastating defeat, with potentially season-ending consequences. The rescue masked a serious problem, and that problem is going to need answering fast. When the final whistle blew at Goodison Park, Pep Guardiola did not hide. He walked straight to the microphones and said exactly what he was thinking. No spin, no carefully chosen words to protect the mood in the dressing room. Just the truth, delivered plainly and directly to anyone willing to listen. The Premier League title, he admitted, is no longer in Manchester City's hands. After the draw, Guardiola acknowledged that the team had snatched a dramatic point, his own words, but he did not allow that narrative to overshadow the bigger picture. The second half was a collective failure. City came out after the break disorganised, passive, and completely unable to deal with an Everton side that simply wanted it more in those 45 minutes. Pep said it himself. The frustration in his voice was clear. The numbers back up exactly why he reacted the way he did. Arsenal are now 5 points clear of City, and that gap holds even if City win their game in hand. Think about what that means in real terms. City would need to win every single remaining match and then rely on Arsenal to drop points somewhere along the way. That is not a position of control. That is a position of dependence. This is also a significant moment historically. According to multiple journalists covering the press conference, this was the first time all season that Guardiola publicly and explicitly stated that the title is out of City's hands. Throughout the campaign, regardless of how difficult moments got, he always framed the situation as something City could influence directly. That framing is now gone. He said it in the open, in front of cameras, immediately after the final whistle, and that carries weight. The quote that circulated immediately across every major sports outlet was direct: Premier League out of City's hands after draw. Short, unambiguous, and coming from the man who has won this league more times than almost anyone else in its history. When Guardiola speaks like that, people listen, and the reaction was instant. Fans were divided. A section of the City support appreciated the honesty, recognising that Pep has never been the kind of manager to hide behind comfortable narratives. Others found it harder to process, not because it was wrong, but because hearing it out loud made the situation feel more real than the scoreline already had. The psychological impact of a manager publicly surrendering the initiative, even partially, is something that ripples through a fan base fast. On the Arsenal side, their supporters and pundits wasted no time pointing to the statement as confirmation that the title is heading to the Emirates. And mathematically, they have every reason to feel that way. The real weight of this moment is not just in the words themselves. It is in what they signal about where this team is mentally. Guardiola is not a manager who speaks carelessly in post-match environments. Every word is intentional. When he tells the world the title is not in City's hands, he is also sending a message internally, to his players, to his staff, and to himself. The comfortable buffer of "we control our own destiny" has been stripped away, and what is left is a much harder, more demanding challenge. Win everything, hope for help, and trust that this squad has enough character to respond. Whether that response comes is the only question that matters now. There is a version of Pep Guardiola that accepts a situation for what it is, and there is a version that refuses to let his squad settle into that acceptance. After the draw against Everton, both versions showed up in the same press conference, and that is exactly what makes him one of the most compelling managers in the sport. Yes, he admitted the title is not in City's hands, but in the same breath, he made something else very clear. This team is not done. Guardiola was direct about what comes next. The squad needs to regroup, reset, and prepare for the 4 games that remain. Every single one of them needs to be won. There is no margin left for dropped points, no room for another second-half collapse, no space for the kind of passivity that allowed Everton to flip the game so dramatically. The standard has to return immediately, and Pep made sure that message landed before anyone had time to dwell on the disappointment. The quote that cut through everything was simple: "It's not over until it's over." It is a line that sounds straightforward, but coming from Guardiola in this specific context, 5 points behind Arsenal, 4 games left, coming off a lead that evaporated in 45 minutes, it carries a very deliberate intention. He is not pretending the situation is comfortable. He is refusing to let his players use discomfort as an excuse to switch off. Next up is Brentford. On paper, a winnable game. But in the context of this title race, there is no such thing as a routine fixture anymore. Every match from here carries the weight of the entire season, and Guardiola knows that better than anyone. The emphasis on regrouping was not accidental language. It was a direct signal to the squad that the response needs to start immediately, not after a period of processing the Everton result. Journalists covering the story also pointed to City's historical record in tight title races under Pep. This squad has come back from larger gaps before. The character exists in this dressing room. The quality is not in question. What is in question is whether the consistency is there across 4 consecutive matches at the level this moment demands. The honest read here is that Guardiola is doing exactly what elite managers do in difficult moments. He is holding 2 truths simultaneously, acknowledging reality while refusing to let it become a ceiling. That is not contradiction. That is leadership under pressure, and City's players will have heard both messages clearly. The bigger challenge now is translation. Words in a press conference are one thing, 45 minutes of intensity against Brentford, and then beyond, is another. Pep has set the tone. The players have to deliver it. If you are watching this and still believe City can do it, and there are very good reasons to believe they can, hit that like button and make sure you are subscribed to Man City Sentinel. Every update from here until the final whistle of this season lands here first. Pep Guardiola gave 2 messages after Goodison Park. The first was about resilience. The second was about reality. And the second one is the one that matters most for where this title race actually stands. Speaking in the mix zone after the final whistle, in front of multiple broadcast cameras and journalists from across the sport, Guardiola confirmed it plainly. The title now depends on Arsenal dropping points. City cannot win it on their own terms anymore. That window closed when Thierno Barry scored his second goal and the scoreline flipped to 3-1 in Everton's favour. The point Doku rescued kept the mathematics alive, but it did not restore City's control over their own fate. This statement came at a specific moment that every City supporter needs to understand. Throughout this entire season, regardless of form dips, injuries, or inconsistent runs, Guardiola consistently framed the title race as something City could dictate through their own performances. That framing gave the squad and the fan base a psychological anchor. It kept the focus internal rather than dependent on what was happening elsewhere. That anchor is now gone, publicly and explicitly, confirmed by the manager himself in real time. The reaction across the football world was immediate. Arsenal supporters and pundits pointed to it as the clearest signal yet that the title is heading to North London. Neutral analysts noted that Guardiola's honesty, while admirable, effectively handed Arsenal a psychological advantage they did not even need to earn on the pitch. City's own manager handed it to them from a mixed-zone microphone. On the City side, supporters were split between appreciating the transparency and feeling the weight of what it actually means. Some pointed to Pep's track record, arguing that this kind of brutal honesty has preceded remarkable final stretch performances before. Others were simply processing the pain of a game that City had in their hands and let go. The arithmetic is worth spelling out clearly. Arsenal are 5 points ahead. Even if City win their game in hand, that gap only closes to 2 points, and Arsenal still hold matches remaining. City need to win every single game left, while simultaneously hoping Arsenal slip up at least once, in a run-in where the Gunners have shown remarkable composure all season. That is not an impossible scenario, but it is a scenario built entirely on someone else's failure rather than City's own excellence. Guardiola knows this. He has navigated title races long enough to understand exactly what the numbers mean. The declaration in the mixed zone was not a moment of weakness. It was a manager being clinically honest with himself, his players, and his club about the mountain that now sits in front of them. The straight take is this: Arsenal are in the driving seat, and they have been for long enough now that calling it anything else would be dishonest. City created this situation themselves, not just through the Everton collapse, but through a handful of other dropped points across the season that allowed the gap to grow. Guardiola's frankness is the right response. What matters now is whether the players find a way to make that frankness irrelevant by the time the final day arrives. When a player steps in front of the cameras after a result like that and refuses to hide behind comfortable language, it tells you something important about the character inside that dressing room. Jérémy Doku did exactly that after the final whistle at Goodison Park, and what he said was not the kind of post-match statement you forget quickly. We gave Everton the game. We lost 2 points today. It feels painful now. But we will keep on fighting. 4 sentences. No excuses. No deflection towards the referee, the conditions, or the quality of the opposition. Just a player who scored twice, including a 97th minute equaliser that kept City's title hopes alive, standing up and taking collective responsibility for a second-half collapse that nearly cost his team everything. The context behind that statement matters. City did not lose this game because Everton were the better side across 97 minutes. They lost control of it because of what happened after the break, a structural breakdown, a drop in intensity, and a collective failure to deal with an Everton side that grew in confidence with every minute that passed. Tierno Barry's 2 goals and Jake O'Brien's header were symptoms of City's problems in that period, not the cause. The cause was internal, and Doku named it directly without being asked to soften the message. The significance of his comment about losing 2 points is not just emotional honesty, it is a technically precise description of what happened. City were winning this game. A win would have kept the title race genuinely open and applied real pressure on Arsenal heading into the final stretch. Instead, a point that felt like a miracle rescue is, in the cold light of mathematics, 2 points dropped from a position of strength. Doku understood that immediately, and he said it out loud. That kind of accountability is rare in modern football. Players are typically coached to speak in generalities after difficult results, to praise the effort, credit the opponent, and avoid anything that could be taken as criticism of teammates or collective performance. Doku ignored all of that. He chose honesty over comfort, and in doing so, he demonstrated a level of maturity that goes well beyond his age and his role in this squad. The reaction from supporters and analysts was notable. A large section of the City fan base pointed to the quote as evidence that this group has not mentally checked out of the title race. The pain in Doku's words is the pain of a player who still genuinely believes City should be leading this race, who knows the gap is self-inflicted, and who is not willing to accept a point as a satisfactory outcome when the team had a lead to protect. That mentality, if it runs through the entire dressing room, is exactly what City need for the 4 games that remain. Analysts also highlighted the broader significance of the 97th minute goal in preventing what could have been a season-defining blow. A defeat at Goodison Park would have left City 8 points behind Arsenal with 4 games remaining. At that point, the title conversation would have been over entirely. Not mathematically, but practically. The gap would have been too large, the games too few, and the pressure too one-sided. Doku's goal kept a thread alive that would otherwise have been cut completely. 1 point from a game City were winning feels painful. It is painful, but 1 point is infinitely better than none, and the manner in which it was earned, through a relentless individual performance from a player who refused to accept defeat even when the team around him had lost its shape, is at least something to hold on to heading into the final stretch of this season. 4 games remain. Every single one needs to be won. And somewhere along the way, Arsenal need to drop points in a run-in where they have looked composed and clinical for most of the campaign. It is a narrow path, and City built that narrowness themselves through results across the season that gave Arsenal the room to breathe. But the path exists. Doku proved at Goodison that this team can find something when the moment demands it most. Guardiola has set the tone. Doku has named the problem and refused to let it be buried under the celebration of a late equaliser. The challenge now is converting that honesty into performance, starting with Brentford and carrying it through every match that follows until the final whistle of this Premier League season. What City can offer in these final 4 games is individual quality that very few squads in this league can match. Haaland is still one of the most reliable finishers in world football. Doku, when he is running at defenders with that kind of energy, is genuinely unplayable. Bernardo Silva brings composure and intelligence in tight moments. And Guardiola, whatever the circumstances, will have this squad prepared tactically for every opponent they face. If City show up at full intensity from the first whistle, they are capable of winning every game left on this fixture list, and that is not an exaggeration, it is just the reality of the talent available in that dressing room. What you cannot expect from this City side, however, is the kind of unbroken, suffocating control that made them so dominant in previous title-winning seasons. The second half at Goodison was not an isolated incident. It is part of a pattern of collective concentration lapses that has cost this team points at critical moments throughout the campaign. When the opposition raises their intensity, City have shown a tendency to absorb pressure poorly rather than reset and manage the game. That vulnerability does not disappear simply because the stakes get higher. If anything, high-pressure situations have exposed it more. The belief has to be there, and the quality is there. But if this team enters any of the remaining 4 games with the same passivity that defined those 45 minutes against Everton, no amount of individual brilliance will be enough to cover it. This is Man City Sentinel. If this breakdown gave you exactly what you needed, hit that like button, leave a comment with your prediction for the title race, and make sure you are subscribed so you never miss a breakdown like this one. We will be here for every twist until the very last day. See you in the next one.